If I could have everybody stand, thank you. And either Gretchen or Stephanie with the pledge. Gretchen?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And if everybody, we've already had some time to visit, but you greet each other or say hi to somebody you don't know.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, thank you.
I'll ask it first if we have any visiting Rotarians.
Have a couple of areas at this stage.
Thank you. Okay, so Michelle, why don't you go first at the back table? Yes, and thank you.
So this is my longtime friend, Gina Noble, and she is a retired Salvation Army officer, which is weird to say. But I've known her since I was a teenager, and she and her husband are cruising the coast all the way from north to south. So, yeah, welcome to this. And with China Lake Club is where they're.
Ridgecrest, California.
Welcome.
So I met, this is Brent from Eugene Rotary. He can probably tell you more about it, but I met him yesterday in conversation and he had, invites from Randy Olson, correct? Rick Olson, sorry. And so I invited him today and he's here, so. thanks for
Welcome.
Do you want to talk about your?
I'm with the downtown Eugene Rotary. However, we live here now. This is my primary residence. So you can only do so much on Zoom. So I appreciate the chance to come here and
Definitely, thank you.
Hope to be considered for transfer.
Okay, excellent. No, I'm not over there. I'm not gonna say you guys are guests or members or that table, but we do have our speaker here, Dan Hellen with OSU. He'll be giving us a presentation on the PacWave Project, an update on that. And this table, nobody new. We have a guest here.
Yes. The guest, this is Noelle Kavanaugh.
So I'm gonna ask if we do, Mark was trying to get the microphone there because we don't have Dana running around with the microphone. We either need to hand it off or give him a second to get to you if we need to say something, so our people online can hear. And no one else, so that's great. So I just want to say good afternoon. Welcome, October 2nd, so a new month. Special thanks to, again, for our greeters, Gretchen and Stephanie, for signing up for on the greeting team, and also for our cleanup team. Tanya, again, for organizing our lunches. It's been great here. And it's great to see everyone and just say hi and enjoy our weather snapping back to sunshine, at least right here. I was on a Zoom meeting with the construction team on the animal shelter down in Walport this morning, where you could hear the rain from inside. That's how hard it was raining. So we're really lucky right here in our little banana belt today. So we're excited to extend a warm welcome to Dan for coming here from the valley. So he had to drive over, but he does get a nice day in this spot for the PacWave update. And it's our first presentation here in October, which is the theme for the month is economic and community development. So it's a very appropriate presentation for a theme. And I did want to invite up our guests from Ridgecrest. From Ridgecrest, California. I understand we did find a flag, so we're going to do a little flag exchange. If we can do that. And then I have a couple other presentations, and then we'll get right into a presentation with Dan. And so for people from our club, if you haven't seen our flag, it is really cool. I haven't seen it. And we will be ordering some more.
And Ridgecrest is a military town. It's home to the largest Navy land holding in the world, NAWS, China Lake Naval Air Weapons Station. And it is the Mojave Desert. That's the miner with his pick. Burros were the main form of transportation in our community for hundreds of years. And then you see the F-18 soaring over the land. It's an amazing Rotary Club. I used to think it was the best in the world, but since I'm standing here.
A nice view too.
Yeah.
And as you can see, ours, we're just trees.
Amen.
It's like over here.
Oregon, through and through.
Thank you, guys.
And take in.
Well,
Thank you. Over the top.
and I would like to bring up now, Stephanie, sorry, I know you're in the middle of eating. But this is my first chance. Stephanie's been busy, of course, with our tourist traffic and business. But Stephanie, we were gonna do this in July. But Stephanie was voted and awarded our Rookie of the Year for our Rotary Club, and I just wanted to give Stephanie her award. So keep hearing it around every week.
Okay, I can't tell. Thank you.
Oh, you sure? Okay.
And one more quick one, then I'll get you up here, Dan, sorry. It's okay. Oh, yeah, okay, yeah. I was going to put you on the spot, I forgot to ask you.
Yeah, good.
But I want to have Rob Thompson come on up. Everybody welcome Rob, he's getting a new Paul Harris Award. So this is the Paul Harris +6, so you get the red one. Wow. So for people who don't, when you get to that level, it's different. So Paul Harris is $1,000 in donations to the foundation. And Paul Harris +1 is 2, so the 6 is actually 7. So congratulations and really thank you, Rob, and your family, everyone else who's been such a great part of our club. And so I could invite up the better half of the Thompson clan. Amy's here to help us welcome Dan, so please welcome Amy.
Thank you, Brian. I was really thrilled when Dan said yes. So thank you, Dan. Dan Hellen is the director of PacWave, which is based at Oregon State University. Is developed largely with funding from the U.S. Department of Energy. And PacWave supports the global marine energy industry by providing open ocean sites for the testing of wave energy converters, research and development of marine energy technologies, and research on the environmental effects of marine energy. Dan joined PacWave in 2013 and has over 30 years of experience directing and managing coastal and ocean projects in fields including marine renewable energy, marine spatial planning, and port and harbor management. So thrilled to have you. Thank you, Dan.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Thanks for having me and giving me an opportunity to give you an update on PacWave.
Do you mind holding that?
Sorry, thank you, Paul. So I was looking through my previous presentations. I think the last time I provided an update on PacWave was probably March or April of 2022. So a lot's happened with PacWave since then. So I got about 20 minutes, so I've got a lot to pack into that. But there we go. Okay, done. So what is PacWave? We're an open ocean wave energy test site. We're pre-permitted, which means we are unique in the US. There's no other test site like us in the US. And we're one of probably about 9 test sites like this in the world. So this is a very, very unique facility that we have based here off Newport. Our main site is located 7 miles offshore, pretty much straight out from the airport. And I've got a map showing you exactly where it is. We are part of Oregon State University. We don't exist as a legal entity at this point. We are just a project at OSU, although we kind of portray ourselves as an organization. Primarily funded by the US Department of Energy, still funded by the US Department of Energy. Basically we offer support for the testing, research and development, demonstration and deployment of wave energy converters, wave energy technology. So our primary mission is to support both the national and international marine energy industries. And our secondary mission is basically to support research around marine energy. So a map of the site, obviously, you know where you are. So we have two sites. We have PacWave North, which is off Yaquina Head. We're not very original with our naming. That's north of Newport. PacWave South is south of Newport. PacWave North is not grid connected. It's just for standalone testing of devices. We're never going to run cables to that one. PacWave South is our flagship site. So this is, as I said, directly out from the airport in a location that was selected by the FINE committee, fishermen involved in natural energy. So as a site selected by the fishing community. As you can see here, it's divided into 4 different areas. We call those the test berths. And each of those has a dedicated subsea cable running from the test site to shore to carry each cable up to 5 megawatts of power. And data. So all the data coming from the devices that are going to be tested out there. Cables come in at Driftwood Beach State Park. There was a long process of selecting where the cables came in. State parks didn't really want us to use Driftwood, but we ended up there because there was no other alternatives despite lots of efforts. This is just a sort of illustration of what we're about. So basically we have test site offshore. We can have 4 different companies testing their devices connected to our cables shown here in black. If you think of our cables like extension cords, basically on the far end of the cables out in the ocean, we have connectors, which allows the developers to bring their cables and their devices connect into our cables and then send power and data back to shore. Comes in at Driftwood. The power then goes to what's called our utility connection and monitoring facility just down from Driftwood. And from there, it goes on to Central Lincoln PUD system. So that's the plan. That's what we're set up to do. This is the timeline for developing PacWave. The red mark arrow here is the last time I provided an update. It's been a long process. We had 8 years of permitting, which is shown in yellow before we got into the construction phase, shown in blue. 4 years of construction, a little over, just wrapped up construction and just beginning to move into the operational phase. I've been on this project for just over 12 years. There's some others on the team who have been on it a little longer, but it's taken a long time to get to where we are. I'm going to talk a lot about the construction because that's what's been going on since I last gave an update. There's really 3 phases of construction, and for those of you who are local, which most of you are, you're going to have seen the impacts of some of this. The first part was the underground construction, which was all based around Driftwood Beach State Park. I'll talk a little bit about that. The other piece was construction of our utility connection and monitoring facility just down the road from Driftwood. And then by far the largest piece, both in terms of complexity and cost, was the installation of our subsea cables. And that happened last year. So the cable landing site, the underground construction around Driftwood, we had Driftwood Beach State Park here in yellow. We have our utility connection and monitoring facility in red. And basically the underground construction work, which was happening when I was doing the update last time, was primarily focused on installing these offshore bores, these offshore conduits, which run up to 130 feet down underneath the seafloor. Each of these blue lines is about a mile long, and then they punch out on the seafloor at about 45 feet of water. And the whole idea of these conduits was to give us something to pull in our cables and then protect the cables from the high energy nearshore area, because we have a license for 25 years of operation. If your cables are on the seafloor moving around, they're going to get destroyed over time. So basically getting these conduits in was the way to get the cables safely to shore. We then did another bore to the UCMF site to install our terrestrial cables. And this is kind of where we were last time I gave an update. We had installed all the conduits, and basically we were busy building what is really a very large splice vault underneath the parking lot of Driftwood. This vault's 74 feet long, 16 feet wide, 10 feet deep. Sizable vault. Part of the agreement with state parks for using the state park was, once we were done, rebuild the parking lot. You can see the manhole covers across the middle, but basically not a lot of impact. Redid sidewalks, built a viewing platform, and so on. And the idea is that, you know, now once we've finished that construction, and we're fully installed with our cables, we should really not be going back into that vault unless there's a problem. So the idea is that we won't be shutting down any of the park or anything for the foreseeable future, as long as things go to plan. The other piece of construction which was underway last time was our UCMF, our Utility Connection and Monitoring Facility. This site plan shows the cables coming in here. And if you remember, we have 4 separate test berths offshore, 4 cables. They actually ran into separate chambers in that vault in Driftwood. And then the individual cables run into secured bays for each of the developers. And the whole idea of that is these companies are commercial companies. They are in competition with each other and wanted to keep their systems completely separate. So we have quadruplicate of everything, you know, cables, bays, and as you'll see, all the metering and switchgear as well. We then have a switchgear building, much like you would have, more glorified version of what you would have in a substation, and then a control building. And this is what it looked like around the time that I presented last time, when we'd finished all our drilling and just done basic site prep. In April of 2023 was when we actually started, you know, the proper vertical build of the facility itself. And then this was taken in February of this year, so a completed facility. The architects who did this were a company called HGE out of Coos Bay, and the construction was done by Girding Builders out of Corvallis. This is basically a substation. Our cables are rated for up to 36,000 volts, so 36 kV. So this is a medium, almost high voltage facility, which is why we have 7-foot high chain link fence around it. The site's covered by CCTV. It's mainly for people's safety. There are a lot of these rooms in this building which are going to have medium voltage equipment in, which we just don't want people in and around. And even a lot of our team, I'm not qualified in medium voltage electrical work. I will not be going into some of these rooms once the site is energized. So with these bays that we have, these 4 very large bays for the developers, we're sort of designing a test site, so we don't know what these developers are necessarily going to be bringing in terms of equipment. So what we provided is a very large generic space that they can use. Their cables actually come into a junction box behind here. They have a grounding switch here, and then they have this 70-foot by 30-something foot bay, which is secured and just for their use to install equipment to condition and monitor and control their devices. The other building, switchgear building, we have warehousing on one side for us, and then the left-hand side is the actual switchgear itself. And this is the inside of it. So we have medium voltage switchgear, we have DC backup system, and then in the black cabinets are basically all the metering and relays. So again, we have quadruplicate, so we have one set for each of the developers. So the power that they're generated can be monitored separately. We know exactly how much power that is being generated, which is critically important to these companies. Then that all comes together in our main breaker. Then we have a central link and PUD cabinet with their supervisory control and data acquisition system. And then we will have another cabinet going on here, added on the end for Bonneville Power Administration, with whom we've just signed a power purchase agreement, which was a big success for us. Basically, the power generated by PacWave will be purchased by BPA, and then the amount of money, probably not a massive amount of money, will flow back down to the developers who are actually generating the power. OSU is not making money. And then the final building is the control building. This is slightly more livable space for the developers. The other buildings are all pre-engineered metal buildings. While the facility is a secured facility, we do have quite a nice sort of reception lobby area and a small conference room off there for when we're giving tours to people. They won't get into the medium voltage areas or the secured space for developers, but we do want to be able to show off our facility. And then each of the developers has a secured monitoring room, pretty basic, but they can install their own equipment. The expectation is with these companies is that they'll be on this site for a couple of weeks setting stuff up, and then they'll go back to wherever their headquarters is elsewhere in the US or elsewhere in the world and monitor and control their devices and come back every now and again to update things. We also have meeting space and break room, slightly more livable. And then the really big part of the project was the subsea and terrestrial cables. We hired a company, RT Casey, out of Louisiana to lead on this. Cables were manufactured by a French company called Nexans in their factory predominantly in their factory in Norway, but also partly in their factories in Switzerland. And then the connectors that go on the end were manufactured by a company in Denmark. And those connectors were then shipped to Norway, terminated onto the cables, and then the cables were then shipped over to the US for the installation. So these are some pictures from inside the factory. So this is actually our cable being spun up. You can see a handrail, guardrail there, so it gives you some scale of how big the equipment is. And then this is our stack of cable sitting on the dock waiting to be loaded. And standing on top is a gentleman called Giovanni Ganella. I'm quite short. Giovanni is a little shorter than me, just to give you a reference. But still, this is a huge stack of cables. This is 47 miles of cable. And if you want to see what the cable is, this is a piece of our cable.
So that, yeah, 47 miles. I want you to try to figure out how much that weighs.
Good. I know that, and I won't tell you at this point. So Giovanni's standing between two of our connectors that go on the ends. You also have a close-up of one of them. So you actually have the connector piece itself, or half a connector to be exact, because the developers will bring the other half. And then these yellow bend restrictors. Critical for handling that cable in all the installation is not to overbend it. It'll damage both the fiber optics and the conductors, and this cable is incredibly expensive. And you'll see for all the installation, one of the key things was maintaining that minimum bend radius. Combine these two, the connector and the bend restrictors weigh about a ton, and you'll see the relevance of that in a minute. So for the installation piece, which all happened last year, there was a whole load of assets, marine assets that were involved. So we had the freighter, the Frida, which brought cables over from Norway to the US. We then had the HOS Innovator, which was out of Port Fourchon, Louisiana, which was the cable lay vessel. So basically, we laid the cables on the seafloor, and then the other ship, the Nautilus, came in and buried the cables. So where the cables came out of that conduit offshore, from then on, we basically buried the cables out to the test site. And I'll talk more about this. But the Innovator predominantly was focused on the cable lay, but had some other work that it did. Just notice 40 people on board the Innovator, 31 the Nautilus. The Liberty was our dive boat. We had a commercial dive team, so 4 divers, dive superintendent, and recompression chamber, everything else crammed onto an 89-foot boat, which was not a lot of space, but critically important to us. So a lot of equipment involved in doing this installation work. So this is just a kind of snapshot of the route of how the cables came. So Rognan is actually inside the Arctic Circle in Norway. Don't ask me why they have a factory there. It's a village of maybe 500 people, maybe 1,000 people. From there, the cables came down to Port Fourchon, Louisiana, arriving in June. Were then transpooled onto the Innovator, because that's where its home port is. The Innovator, when it was fully loaded, had to sit for a couple of days while they waited for a hurricane to pass through the Gulf, which at vast expense while they're sitting there waiting there on weather standby. then headed down through the Panama Canal and then up to North Bend, which is where RTKC based their installation operations. This is just a few clips taken off the webcam at the Miller Flores locks, which are the last locks on the Panama Canal before the Pacific, and that is an innovator fully laden coming through. Exciting for us to see the cable actually in the correct ocean. And this was the schedule for last summer's work. A lot going on. I'm not going to go into all the details of it, but we had, one vessel, the Liberty, doing a grapnel run to try and remove debris from along the cable routes. We had a terrestrial crew who were doing the terrestrial cable installation and then assisting with the subsea cable pull-in. We had the Nautilus doing the actual pull-in and the cable lay. We had dive support. The innovator doing that. And then the innovator did some secondary armoring, basically adding what are called concrete mattresses for cable sections that we didn't get good burial. And then the Nautilus doing the burial basically spent 2 months out there trying to bury the cable into the seafloor. So this is the innovator sitting off driftwoods. Basically a lot of equipment added on board, and I'll just give you a very quick overview in a second. I forgot I had this picture. This is just showing the setup on board, the cable that's being handed around at the moment, the stack of cable in what's called the cable tank on the vessel, and then the connectors strapped onto the side of the cable and underneath the deck there. So that stack of cable, you were asking how much it weighed. That's just over 1,000 tons of cable on board. So the vessel was actually very close to maximum laden. I don't think they were actually allowed to fill up their fuel tanks because there was so much cable on board. And we were very, very pleased to get that first cable off.
Trying to think of the structure underneath where it's at, what they had to do to the
Yeah.
hull. I mean,
Yeah, I didn't go under there. I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail here, but a lot of equipment installed. So everything with a yellow label is associated with the lay of the cable. We had some secondary armoring that we put on immediately where the cable came out of the conduit, where we knew we weren't going to get good burial because there was some hard seafloor. And then we had remotely operated vehicle, 2 of them, a primary one and a backup, to do a lot of the observation and a little bit of seafloor work. And then critical was a very large crane that was part of the ship. All the rest of the equipment was installed on the ship for this work. And I apologize for people who get vertigo, but this is just a little bit of footage of the cable. You can see 3 people standing up here for scale. The cable looping in up over the top of this 70-foot high gantry. And that's basically to prevent the cable overbending. It then comes back down to the deck through what's called a linear cable engine here, which is basically what helps force the cable off the stern. We have the ROV shack, as it's called, backup ROV. The yellow tether in the water, whenever you see the yellow tether, is the other ROV that's sitting on the seafloor. Basically, whenever the cable was being installed, you had an ROV on the bottom watching what was going on. And then the control shack here, which is where they basically ran all the operations. So basically, once the cables had been pulled into driftwood, we then did what was called layaway, and this is laying the cable. So for each cable, it would be a couple of days of just very, very slowly feeding cable out, heading out to the test site. And we did this 4 times, but with 4 cables. So this shows the cable route running from the end of the conduit here. We have the 4 cables looping up behind our test site and zoomed in. The test site here is shown in blue. So the 4 cables coming in, and the yellow dots are where we deployed these subsea connectors. So you remember these 1-ton subsea connectors with their bend restrictors. So we laid all the cable, and then the last thing we had to do was deploy these subsea connectors, which were on the wrong side of that 17-foot high gantry. So basically we had to lift those connectors up and over the top of the gantry. So do probably a 90-foot lift at sea with a ton of connector connected to a cable that we didn't want to overbend, to then lower that down off the back of the boat. This was probably the most complex and highest risk operation of everything that we did. We did it 4 times. The first 3 times we did it, it happened between 2 and 4:30 in the morning, of course. The third time we did it, it was pouring with rain, just to make it more fun. And the last time we did it, it was daylight and it was nice and sunny and calm, of course. So you can see here, this is the connector being lifted up. You can see it right up here, going over the top of the gantry. Again, this gives you some idea of the height that they were lifting this thing. Not an ideal thing to do at sea. It's, you know, that starts swinging and it can get kind of scary. All worked out, brings it down the other side. Then what they did was basically attach a winch line onto that connector, put the connector into the chute off the stern, and then lower the connector down to the seafloor. So now we have the connector on the seafloor, but it's still attached here by the winch line. So this is where the ROV came in, where it actually does some of the work. You can see the connector on the seafloor here. They would send down the little ROV, and connecting the winch line to the connector was basically a special shackle, an ROV shackle, where they would use the manipulator on the ROV, pull on this piece of string with a monkey paw on the end, and discharge basically a spring-loaded pin in the shackle. So that would pop loose, and the winch cable would then be separate from the connector, and we could pull the winch cable up and it's installed. So that's like, you know, nerve-wracking thing when you're playing around with this, trying to grab the stone on the seafloor. But successful on all 4 times, even if it took a few efforts to do it. Ending up with 4 subsea connectors sitting on the seafloor, basically waiting until we're ready to bring developers in, when they'll be hoisted up to a vessel, connected, and the developers will be connected to our cables. The last bit was the Nautilus. I mentioned this. This was a Spanish vessel, came over from Spain for this work. 31 people on board, all of them basically dedicated to the operation of this. And this is the cable maintenance ROV3. There is a person standing up in the corner to give you scale. So this remotely operated vehicle is 12 feet by 12 feet by 9 feet, weighs just under 10 tons in there. And as you can see, it's got tracks here. So basically what it would do is they would sit above the cable, and then it would basically very slowly drive along over the cable, and then using these jetting swords, jet down into the seafloor, and the cable would drop down into the trench that they created. And they would do multiple passes to do this. They did, you know, up to 3 passes to try and get the cable to bury as much as possible. This is the control room for that ROV, and this is a sonar image of looking at the cable track. And then this is actually just some video footage of what those guys were seeing. So this is the cable that they're following and burying. That's looking towards where the jets are. Obviously, you can't see very much. And then tracking everything with sonar. So 2 months of that burial work, basically with the work of all the cable installation, was completed in 13th of October. So getting a little later in the season than we had hoped to get done. We had good burial, but we stopped mainly because we were facing 7 to 10 days of bad weather coming in. And the cost of these assets, when they're sitting on weather standby, is incredibly expensive. When we had the dive boat, the cable lay vessel, the burial vessel, and the shoreside crew, the standby was $360,000 a day. So we did not want too many weather days. So we were timing things as best as possible to minimize how much that was going to cost. A lot of 300 vessel days under charter for this work, over 5,000 person days to get all this cable installed, and 1,000 hours of that large ROV working on the seafloor, including a record for them, which was 138 hours of continuous work on the seafloor. So that large ROV, 4 and 5 3/4 days sitting there burying cable. It's a heck of a workhorse. So basically that puts us ready for operations. All that work was for this, to basically have our utility connection and monitoring facility, and then everything else pretty much buried all the way out to our test site. We're now just moved into our operational phase. As Department of Energy approved us moving into our operational phase last Friday. So after 12 plus years working towards it, we are technically now operational, which is huge for everyone on the project. In preparation, we're continuing to do all the environmental monitoring that we do, both in terms of seafloor work, acoustic work. When we have devices in the water, we'll also be monitoring for electromagnetic fields and other things. We're also doing wave and current characterization work. And then we're prepping for the developers who are going to come in and test. And we have 3 companies lined up to test, maybe 2. One of them's struggling financially at the moment. But we have PacWave out of California with their X-Wave device, which is a larger version of this deployment they did off Scripps Pier a few years ago. And then Sea-Power out of Virginia, their engineering is actually all out of Corvallis. And it's a larger version of this device, which they deployed in Hawaii the other year. And then the final company is a team with Aqua Harmonics, who are based out of Portland and Portland State University. These companies are all funded by the US Department of Energy with a funding opportunity going back to 2022. And the hope is that they will be coming in next year to test. There is a little bit of uncertainty, obviously, with the flow of funding and also with the government shutdown at the moment. But the hope is that later next summer, we'll see the first devices coming into PacWave, and then hopefully after that, a series of other devices coming in. So that's where we are. That's the update on what's been going on PacWave. I'll be happy to take any questions if people have any. Yes.
I got a few questions. This is fascinating. Yeah, I got a few. This is fascinating. One is the budget, what the whole thing costs. But second and more fun, during any construction project, big or small, you always have that moment where you say, "Oh, sugar." What was your biggest "oh, sugar" moment?
There was a lot of them. Also, I was the owner's rep on all of this. I don't do construction. So I was just the idiot who tried to stay out of the way, took lots of pictures and, asked stupid questions. But there were a few times, there was some of it with just, there was definitely that feeling with lifting that connector over the top. The first one we did, they just lifted it up above the cable tank and we got hit by a series of like 6-foot waves. And suddenly this thing started swinging. And I was there just videoing it with my camera. And I just had this feeling that, am I just videoing one of these disaster at sea scenarios? And they immediately lowered it down, got it under control. All the people we work with, all the companies we work with, all the field guys were just fantastic. They do this for a living. So when stuff like that happens, they react instantly. They know what to do. They stabilize the situation, sit down, work out what to do and resolve. So there were a few. There were also a few things that we did. People ask, about things that go wrong in that big vault that we built in Driftwood. We put in some generic sort of mounting plates for gear for when they were doing the cable pull-in. And right at the end of the project, one of the engineers from Jacobs Engineering in Corvallis is in there and comes back and goes, "We put them on the wrong wall." The guy from our team who had designed where they were going to go had been down there and taken photographs of. We'd had 12 companies working on this. It didn't matter because they were just generically placed, but for some reason, no one realized we put them on the east wall rather than the west wall. So there was a few of us. You asked about budget. The overall cost for this project for PacWave all the way through permitting and everything else, about $140 million. The cable piece, the manufacturing, the purchase, manufacturing, shipping, and installation of the cable is about $70 million. So it's about half of it. Cable is incredibly expensive. The cable itself was $18 million.
Is there a comparable project on the East Coast?
No. In a longer presentation, I talk a little bit more about wave energy. Pretty much all wave energy in the world is on west-facing coasts. So it's really good up in Scotland is where the leading wave energy test site hopefully not for very much longer, in the world is the European Marine Energy Center. So west facing coasts tend to be where there's wave energy. And that's the thing, you know, wave energy is one form of renewable energy to go into the mix, but there's a lot of places where wave energy won't work, places where, you know, solar or wind or geothermal or something would work a lot better. But generally, there won't be a lot of wave energy on the East Coast or the West Coast.
Thanks. Dan, and you come back up. I just want to give a brief thank you to you. One of our main goals for Rotary is to try to eradicate polio. So as a thank you for presenting today, we're going to vaccinate 50 children against polio in their game. So thank you again.
Thank you very much.
Looks like I'm still on here, so let me check the time. So we got about 10 minutes, so I want to go through a few things real quick. I want to, because people may or may not know, because nobody knows who exactly was on the sheet for the football game. 50-50, nobody, I won't say nobody won last week. The Ducks won, but nobody won our pool. So, final score was 30-24. That spot's still available. Anybody wants to try for this next one? So we will have it still open, since we had this will be our third week. So let me know if you want to buy a spot square. It's $5. Again, the pot's up close, like around 250 right now. So almost half full of squares. So if you want to get a spot, let me know. It'll be the Oregon State versus Appalachian State game this weekend. So we're switching over to Oregon State. Nobody wins that one. I intend to keep it open again just because it'll be another good game the week after that with Oregon and Indiana. And then we'll switch back. We'll keep alternating if we don't get a winner. And we're just going to keep going. Hopefully we'll fill all the spots and guarantee a winner. But if we don't, eventually it will, if nobody wins it, it'll just go to the club. I know we have some other announcements. I'm just kind of spacing them right now. So if you could let me know if you have an announcement. I know people have already told me they did, but yeah, Michelle, I think Michelle.
As I say every week, all the things are happening. So we have started advertising now our family pumpkin decorating night, which will be the night before Halloween, so October 30th. So we're looking for anyone who wants to sponsor some pumpkins or pitch in and volunteer at the event, helping kids color, paint, carve pumpkins so that they can just have a fun time with their family for that night. And then November 4th is our kettle kickoff, which will be at 6 p.m. In our chapel at the Salvation Army. And this year it's free to attend, and Julia is catering, so you know it's gonna be good food. Y'all missed out on the lunch last year, I'm telling you, that was pretty delicious. And then, yeah, lots of things going on. We're already getting set to open up for angel tree applications in a couple weeks, and bell ringing volunteers and all of the things. So if you're interested in helping with any of that, let me know. And yeah, we'll get you signed up for it.
Thank you, Michelle. I know Julia had an announcement as well.
Christy,
Oh, great.
My husband and I are participating in the Dancing with the Coastal Stars, which is a fundraiser for Samaritan House. So we are asking for any generous donations. If you're not familiar with Samaritan House, they house homeless families and offer support, and it's kind of a stepping stone to help them get back on their feet. I know I've seen a couple go through that have come out and got their own homes, good jobs, gone through college. One graduated as a nurse. So they do a lot for the community. We're very passionate about it. So there are QR codes on your table. If you'd like, you could take a sheet and share it with your friends, family, or coworkers. And then the performance is November 1st. I think there's still tickets if anybody would like to attend at Performing Arts Center.
Thank you, Christy. Any other?
Okay.
if you want to have some fun, on Saturday, the 11th, the Lockton Community Club is having a harvest auction. We asked all of our 70-some members to donate an item. You never know what might show up at this auction. Anyway, come on out, 6 o'clock.
Thanks, guys. You want to hand that to Julia first and then we'll get it over to Rob, just, we don't run back and forth too much.
This is about 2 months out, but for the fourth year in a row, I'm gonna be, managing the Thanksgiving meal, the free Thanksgiving meal at the 60 Plus Activity Center. And the first couple years, our beloved Sony, Graham, who passed last year, was the supervisor there, and they asked me to do the meal again this year. I make food for about 250 people, and it is so much work. The date is on, November 23rd, and every year I've asked our club to help staff with volunteering shifts for that. And so I will be making an online sign-up form, so you're able to sign up. And since it is going to be a Rotary volunteering event, we will get makeups for it, and I'll explain a little bit about makeups if you aren't super familiar with those later. But November 23rd is the date of that. And so we'll keep an eye out, and I'll let you know when the signups are.
Thank you, Julia. And
I always find it more efficient to find myself for a birthday a couple days ago. So I'll give $51 to our local Lincoln County Rotary Fund, and I'll give $49 to my next Paul Harris. And by the way, it's taken me 20+ years to get to that level. So it takes a while. And Dan, great job.
thank you.
Yeah, I've heard your presentation several times. It's better and better each time. Very exciting stuff. It's really cool. It's really cool.
Happy birthday, Rob. I'm gonna not do any more unless anybody's got any quick happy bucks they want to do. Sure, people are happy about the duck game, but. How happy am I? I'll be $50 happy to our total fund. That was a pretty exciting game. It was at least worth the cost of admission, I think. Any others anybody wants to bring up? Okay, and because we're kind of short on time, I want to get right to the secretary report with Julia, and I'll just, you can see it.
Hello, Rotarians. All right, secretary report today. We have 30 members with us in the room. Thank you, everybody, for coming. We have 5 members online, and with our 3 visiting Rotarians and 1 guest, we have 39 people visiting today for our meeting. The membership incentive is $20 this week, and Tiana DeVries is the winner of the membership incentive, and she is online. So congratulations to Tiana. And that is all. Thank you very much.
Thanks. John, do we have social media and 50/50?
We do.
Awesome.
Get it going here. PacWave here. Okay, the social media winner this week is the only person I know in our club that eats salad for breakfast.
Mark Miranda. And this week's 50/50 is worth $152, and the winner will receive $76. So let's see who wins. $106 to Megan Shane. She didn't even think he could go.
So I wish we'd had our high school kids here because I would have wanted to discuss the important, when you were talking about when this amount of weight is 90 feet above the ship, this amount of cable is no longer in the ship. So I don't know how that thing was balanced to begin with, but if some of that cable was out when you're getting hit by waves, that math is pretty impressive math, and I hope they weren't just kind of like crossing their fingers. Yeah, but then I don't know if people noticed too from those pictures, you can tell that that's what that boat does. I don't know if you saw the chute where that cable, which seems massive coming out of. that was maybe 1/8 the size of that chute. So if you can imagine the size of cable that could go through that they could lay out of that ship, that's amazing. And I get that there's all different kinds, that they're not all that heavy, but it's still is yeah, it's really amazing how much logistics, not just to get it all over here and get everything timed with the mathematical logistics and all. It's really impressive. Yeah, so I would like to, I'm sure the kids would have had a lot of questions. So our next regular lunch meeting's on October 9th. I don't think we've got a presentation lined up yet, but we're working on, we're always, yeah. There'll be a few different things going on, if we don't have a single presentation. But so again, thank you everyone for coming, and I'll ask, I don't know if it, Stephanie, are you gonna take us out with the four-way test? Okay, thank you. Everybody rise.
First.
Is it very?
Second.
Is it
Fair officer. Third.
Goodwill and ships.
Fourth.
Will be left no all concerned.
Thank you, everybody.